T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Coach on Fire Radio.
And I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors. That's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show.
All right. Good morning and welcome to the Raw Truth with Tracy. I'm your heart-centered trauma coach and mentor. I'm a raw and vulnerable human being who wants to give you the gift of loving yourself and allowing you to be your priority. Today, as a special guest, I got Debbie Ducommun, who is here. She's a family studies graduate with a background in education and human resources management. As a career in academic advising, she's worked for over 26 years in real estate and home renovations. And in her business life, she came to understand the power and importance of resilience. And what that played on her personal level within families and in business. Debbie, if you want to take over and introduce yourself and share a little bit about you and what you do.
Okay, great, thanks. And it's great to be here with you, Tracy. I know we had such a great connection at Shine Live last week, and it's a real privilege and an honor for me to be able to continue with our talk this week here for everyone to hear and for everyone to join us. So I am a resilience coach. I am the leader and administrator of a closed Facebook group called Resilience Divas. And we just really give women the tools. We have a few men in our group as well, but we really give women the tools and the skills to be able to not only acknowledge the resilience that they already have within them, but also to grow and learn new resilient skills and to really empower them in their own lives so that they can start to really thrive and shine in their lives. So that's what I do.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And then how did you learn to create this group for these people to bring them together? So, what made you want to do that?
So I had attended Shine Live 2 years ago. And really when we talked about our why in life and our why in our business, I was there to really, I was open-ended and wanting to explore my why. And because of the life experiences I had been through, what I really came down to is that, you know, my purpose in life was to share, because of some of my experiences in life, resilience. And resilience is a huge underlying piece for me in terms of almost everything that we do in life. And so I had kind of tossed that idea around for a while. And then I was going through a divorce at the time, and I was in the middle of a move, and I had 500 balls in the air, and I was working at a new job, and I thought, hey, you know, what better time to start a right in the middle of everything, you know, because I need this too. And so it's really all about women supporting other women, a tribe of women, and a really important piece of resilience is connection with other people. And so, you know, just one day, literally while movers were moving pieces of furniture out of my house before they unhooked my computer, I started the group, and it just took off from there. So
beautiful. So
yeah.
Would you say resilience is like a skill that people have, or do you believe it's a quality? Like, is it something that is learned, or is it something that's just innately within them that kind of comes to the surface when experiencing any sort of like major shift in their life?
I would say very much so. It's a learned skill. And, you know, all of the research that's been done to date really bears that out as well. So, for instance, you know, when we're a child, you know, we have what's called, so I have a psychology background too. So this is the kind of brain science that's interesting to me. So if anybody here has, sort of Psych 101, you would have learned about Pavlov's dog and conditioning, and how when they ring a bell, food appears or doesn't appear, sort of thing. So when you're a child, and we all form needs, a basic need of safety, and then there's, the one level up from that is satisfaction. So let's say, for instance, we go and we pet a dog, and the dog kind of growls at us. And then a parent comes over and says, no, stay away from the dog, or pet the dog on its back, not in its face. And then you have that conditioning, it's positive reinforcement. And then going forward in life, you're not as scared of dogs. And then you've also had that positive reinforcement from your parent that the world is a safe place. And so you get that satisfaction. And what happens in the brain at that point in time is that circuits become wired, so across synapses. And so, you get that event, and then you have the satisfaction, and you have the positive reinforcement and the conditioning, which then leads to what we call neuroplasticity. So the brain remains flexible, and in order to encode and learn and unlearn patterns of behavior. And the conditioning is how the brain learns and stabilizes our conditioned patterns. So having said that, simple version of that is that when something happens in our childhood, we learn a behavior pattern. And so later on in life, we've got this whole big jumble of learned behavior patterns. Some of them work really, really well for us, and some of them not so well. So it's almost like they keep us in sort of the ones that don't work so well keep us sort of in a swamp of toxicity that we can't sort of find our way out of. And the good news that the scientists and the psychologists and all of these people are finding out now is that we can make our way out of these neural swamps by reconditioning our brain. Over time, we can recircuit and recondition the brain. And this is really exciting news because, like, the simple version of this is old dogs can learn new tricks. And
Great.
So that's really the purpose of my group. We've got women coming to this group who have had all kinds of issues with, let's say, illness, divorce, any number of things that have created almost like a fight or flight response, where they're generalizing that fight or flight response to their whole life, and they're kind of living stuck and in fear. And so the science of that is that we don't resolve that overnight.
Yes, exactly.
That's not the way the brain works. The brain, you're not just told, okay, you know what, you're safe, don't worry about that. And then you don't feel the fear anymore, because the brain actually doesn't work that way. The brain has to recircuit itself. And so it's like any muscle. It takes practice over time, and that recircuiting happens slowly, bit by bit, over time. And so in our group, we're not here to do anything super scientific. What we're doing is we're helping rewire the brain by consistent positive messages of, belonging, connection, safety, all of these kinds of messages that actually recondition our brain so that we can cope better with life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. One of the things I noticed too as a heart-centered trauma coach is I've learned the same thing through not only my own experiences, but the experiences of my clients as well. And being self-taught, one of the things that I found very, very helpful was very much what you're saying, is being able to rewire our brains to know that we are no longer stuck in that trauma, that we can move past those stories that we constantly tell ourselves because of the situations that we faced. So true resilience comes with having the proper self-care, with being able to identify and take self-responsibility in our own learning and to be able to build up the resilience in ourselves. So what kind of skills do you think that someone who, like, I know for myself, the skill sets that it took a lot of somewhat coaxing within my own energetic body to come to a place of peace.
Right.
So what kind of skills do you think people, what would you say would be the best skills to build up that resiliency for people who maybe are still kind of stuck within that segment of trauma or experience, like going through a loss or grief or anything like that? What would you say the skill set would, like, what would be like some of the primary skills that they would have to enhance in order to build up that resilience?
Yeah. So, like the first step that's really, really important is recognizing. And recognizing involves a few different things. It involves understanding and recognizing what resilient skills we already have. And that's by recognizing compassion for ourselves. So when we look back on our lives, for instance, and we say, maybe there were some dysfunctional things I did as a child to sort of get through, but there were also some things that I did as a child that were, when I was, going through those formative years, that were very compassionate, both to myself and towards others. So for instance, if a person, and this is just something, an example from one of the books that I've read, not a personal example, but for instance, if there's a lot of, trauma going on inside of the home and a child, thinks to themselves, you know what, I'm not comfortable with this right now, and I'm going to this is a good time for me to take the dog for a walk and alleviate some of my pain here. So that's regulating pain and being compassionate towards ourselves. And so when we kind of look back on our lives and realize the times when we've had self-compassion, that really helps us to, as a starting point, a baseline, to start to build on that. And so from there, we build on that, on self-compassion with mindfulness. And mindfulness is living in the present, staying in the present moment. And it's what our attention sort of rests upon. And, one of the big aspects that I try and reinforce within my group is self-acceptance. And self-acceptance is not something, once again, that can happen overnight. It's wiring of the brain circuitry. So, for instance, if somebody's going through divorce and you say to them, self-acceptance is for you to accept that, this wasn't a right situation for you. Well, okay, at sort of an intellectual level, they can maybe accept that, but their brain hasn't quite got there yet. So over time, there's consistent messages of that, to the point where, one day they go, you know what, I'm accepting of myself, of who I am, of my reality, of what I represent, and I'm good with that. And that helps, that's a real strong quality of resilience at that point, because you've accepted the part of you that ...
Right. Yep, that totally makes sense. It makes me think of the shadow aspects of ourselves that we kind of put in the way of seeing our true authentic self. So not acknowledging certain parts of ourselves because of experiences we may have experienced, and then so not accepting those parts of ourselves, we're actually denying a large part of who we are.
Yeah.
And yeah, as you're talking, one of the stories that comes to my mind for myself as a child was I wanted validation from my family that I was doing good or whatnot. And one of the things that I did was, when I was in school, in terms, I guess, my self-compassion and regulating my pain, I would go and I would make up a story and say to my teachers, at the end of class, I want my mom, and it was a total lie because my mom didn't want it, I wanted it, was getting my teachers to write how well behaved I was in class and how well I was doing within my, with my schoolwork, because I was genuinely curious but at the same time, it also forced me to